On July 4th, 2026, the United States of America will celebrate the 250th anniversary of when our young nation declared its independence from Great Britain. As we prepare for the parties and picnics, the concerts and fireworks displays, let's take a few moments to look at the document that changed the course of history. Now, most of us can recite the most famous line, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." These aren't our only rights, of course, but without them, any other rights don't mean much. And notice where the Declaration says those rights come from. Not from government, not from a king, not from public opinion. They are endowed by our Creator. The Declaration goes on to say that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. We know that government is important for an orderly society. Good government protects its people, enabling them to live in safety and security without fear or unjust threats. Good government promotes liberty, allowing its citizens to act, speak, and live according to their choices, as long as those choices don't harm others. Good government makes it possible for its citizens to seek fulfillment and purpose, and to make decisions and take actions that will improve their lives and also lift up their communities. But government functions best when it functions under the consent of the governed, its citizens. To use a common business term, good government is not top-down, it's bottom-up. That idea was radical then, and it still challenges the world today. If you haven't read the entire Declaration of Independence lately, this is a good time to review it. I'll leave a link to it in the show description. I'm going to skip past the list of grievances against Great Britain, but I encourage you to read them because they help us understand what was happening then that drove the colonists to revolt. But let's go to the closing line of the document, after the colonies declared themselves to be free and independent states. That line isn't, but should be, as well known as the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness line. That line says, "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." A total of 56 delegates to the Continental Congress signed the Declaration of Independence. Most of the signers were Christians, and the Declaration itself reflects a clear belief that our rights come from the Creator, from God, not from government. These visionaries were incredibly brave. The ideas in the Declaration of Independence were revolutionary at the time. The most common form of government in the world was monarchy, and here were these upstart colonists announcing that they were going to form a republic, an act that branded them as traitors. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch has written a book, Heroes of 1776, the story of the Declaration of Independence. It's a children's book, but I think adults would be well served to read it. I saw an interview Justice Gorsuch did about the book, and he said this about the signers. They thought they were signing their death warrants. They were committing an act of treason. They were subjecting themselves to death by hanging, and they knew that. They suffered tremendously. But they did it anyway. They were willing to forego personal safety and comfort to lay the foundation for a country that would not just grow into a world leader, a superpower, but that would lead in so many other ways, in human rights, in the arts, in science and technology, in standard of living. Has America lived up to its founding ideals perfectly? We know it hasn't. We aren't perfect, but where we've fallen short as a nation, we've worked to make changes. And the power of the words in the Declaration of Independence gave future generations a standard to strive for, a truth to claim, and a direction to keep moving forward. We sit here now, blessed to have the perspective of history, to be able to look back over the last 250 years and see what the sacrifices of our country's founders accomplished. And yes, we still have work to do. We always will. But this government of the people, by the people, and for the people, this amazing social experiment has proven to be more successful than possibly even our founders thought it could be. We owe not only the men who stepped up, who crafted and signed the Declaration of Independence, but all of the heroes of colonial times a debt of gratitude that's impossible to repay. They gave us a great gift, and with it, a great responsibility. Let's accept it with enthusiasm and grace, with strength and integrity, and with a renewed commitment to use our freedom well, as citizens, as neighbors, and as followers of Christ. And as we celebrate this milestone in our nation's history, let's remember not just the opening words of the Declaration, but also those powerful closing words. They weren't just something our founders pledged. They are something each generation must choose to live. When we come back, we'll look at another revolutionary idea from 1776. Not political independence this time, but economic freedom, and why it still matters today.
What if your faith shaped your decisions, not just on Sundays, but every day at work? Christian Business Almanac is a page-a-day guide designed for values-driven entrepreneurs, leaders, and professionals who want their faith to show up where it matters most. Each day delivers scripture, practical insight, and thoughtful reflection, helping you integrate biblical truth into leadership, work, and life. This isn't theory. It's faith applied, one day at a time. Learn more and find purchase links at christianalmanac.com. That's christianalmanac.com.
Welcome back. If you believe in coincidences, this is an interesting one. In the same year that the Continental Congress met and declared independence from Great Britain, a Scottish professor named Adam Smith released what was essentially a declaration of economic independence. The full title of what we've come to refer to as the Wealth of Nations was An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. It consisted of 5 books in 2 volumes and was published on March 9th, 1776, less than 4 months before the Declaration of Independence was adopted on July 4th. At more than 1,000 pages in many editions, The Wealth of Nations is not exactly light beach reading, but its influence is hard to overstate. I haven't read it, but a number of our nation's founders did, and Smith's ideas had a significant influence on the economic structure of the United States. Thomas Jefferson owned a copy, made use of it, and later described The Wealth of Nations as the best book to read on money and commerce, unless Jean-Baptiste Say's work was available. The early United States was trying to answer the same kinds of questions Smith addressed. What makes a nation wealthy? How should trade work? What should government tax? Should the country remain mostly agricultural or develop manufacturing? How much economic independence did the new nation need? Before independence, the colonies lived under Britain's imperial trade system with restrictions, preferences, laws, and policies designed to benefit the empire. But the American Revolution was not only political, it was also economic. The colonies wanted individual freedom, yes, but they also wanted the right to govern their own economic life. Freedom is not only about declaring what government cannot do to us. It's also about accepting the responsibility to use our lives, our work, our resources, and our opportunities wisely. Smith said that when people invest their money in ways they believe will protect their own interests and produce the greatest return, they often end up helping the larger society too, even though helping society was not their main goal. Smith wasn't saying selfishness automatically helps everyone. He was saying that under the right conditions, people pursuing their own legitimate interests can sometimes do more good for society than people who loudly claim they're acting for the public good. And that phrase, under the right conditions, is important. Smith was not arguing for dishonesty, exploitation, corruption, or greed without restraint. He believed markets function best when people are free to work and trade, but also where there is justice, competition, and the rule of law. Reuters noted in its 2026 anniversary coverage of The Wealth of Nations that modern scholars continue to debate Smith's legacy, but they also emphasized that his work criticized protectionism, monopolies, and special interests, not merely government itself. Smith argued for a free, competitive commercial society in which people are free to work, specialize, trade, invest, and compete under the rule of law. That's not far removed from the biblical picture of honest work and responsible stewardship. Proverbs 14:23 says, "All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty." Work matters. Productivity matters. Diligence matters. And 1 Peter reminds us that what we have been given is not only for ourselves. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Under Britain's colonial system, the colonies were supposed to supply raw materials and remain dependent on British manufacturers. That meant colonists were restricted from turning some of their own products into finished goods or using their capital and labor in the ways they believed would be most profitable. Smith wrote this: "To prohibit a great people, however, from making all that they can of every part of their own produce, or from employing their stock and industry in the way that they judge most advantageous to themselves, is a manifest violation of the most sacred rights of mankind." That takes us back to the inalienable rights listed in the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration says our rights come from our Creator. Smith was writing about economic restrictions, not theology, but both documents point toward the same larger truth. Human beings are not merely tools of the state. We are not created to serve an empire, a bureaucracy, or a privileged class. We are created with dignity, capacity, responsibility, and purpose. That doesn't mean every economic choice is automatically moral. Freedom gives us room to choose well, but it also gives us room to choose badly. We can use freedom to build, create, serve, hire, invest, and bless others. Or we can use it to exploit, manipulate, consume, and hoard. That's why economic freedom, like political freedom, requires moral responsibility. A free people need more than laws. We need character. Within decades of the publication of The Wealth of Nations, the Industrial Revolution transformed much of the Western world. In the following centuries, global income per capita multiplied many times over. Economic historians debate exactly how much credit Smith should receive for that transformation. And we should be careful not to turn one book into the single cause of modern prosperity. But his work gave language and structure to ideas about markets, labor, trade, and growth that shaped economic thinking for generations. The 2025 Economic Freedom of the World report from the Fraser Institute found that when comparing the most economically free quarter of countries with the least economically free quarter, average incomes were 6.2 times greater. Incomes for the poorest 10% were 7.8 times greater. People lived about 17 years longer. Infant mortality was lower, and environments were cleaner. The report shows correlation, not simple one cause, one effect proof, but the pattern is significant. That matters because economics is not just about charts, trade policy, or academic theory. It's about whether people can work, start businesses, provide for families, create jobs, develop ideas, and improve their communities. For Christians, that should keep us from treating economic freedom as merely political or personal. It's also vocational. It is connected to stewardship, service, generosity, and opportunity. As we celebrate 250 years of freedom, let's take a moment to acknowledge a quiet Scottish professor who was as radical and revolutionary as our country's founders, and the influence he had on the economic system that has allowed the United States to become a global superpower. But let's also remember this: freedom is never only something we inherit. It's something we practice. We practice it when we work honestly. We practice it when we make decisions that honor God and serve others. We practice it when we resist the temptation to demand freedom for ourselves while ignoring the responsibilities that come with it. The founders risked their lives to claim political freedom. Adam Smith helped explain the power of economic freedom. But both kinds of freedom ask something of us. Let's receive that freedom with gratitude, protect it with wisdom, and use it in ways that reflect the character of the one who created us to live with purpose. I'll be back in a moment with this week's real life tip.
If you're serious about integrating faith into the decisions you make every day, don't leave it to chance. Join the Christian Almanac email list, and each new episode will be delivered to your inbox as soon as it's released. No extra effort. Just clear, consistent input when it matters most. You'll also receive Shareable Saturday, concise insights you can apply immediately or share with your team. Sign up at christianalmanac.com/connect.
Have you checked your online bios lately? Are they current? Do they accurately reflect the image you want to project? This week's real-life tip is: regularly review all of your online bios for accuracy and completeness. This includes what's on your company's website, any other website where you're listed, such as if you serve on the board of an organization, and all of your social media profiles. If you have someone on your team who writes those bios for you, great. But it's your responsibility to be sure the information they put out is accurate and verifiable. Maintain a list of everywhere your bio appears and set aside a few minutes to check each one at least once a year or whenever something significant happens. If you change companies, get a promotion, earn a degree, receive an award, you might want to include that in your public bio information. And you always want your contact information to be correct. If you check a bio and something isn't right, and it might be because the person uploading the information made a mistake, get it corrected. And when you do that annual review of your bios, consider refreshing them, even if nothing significant has changed. Maybe update some of the language so it doesn't get stale. And consider a new profile picture if the one you have is more than a few years old. Our online identities are important. You may not be able to control what is said about you on other sites, but what's on your sites and social media profiles should be able to pass the strictest scrutiny. An outdated bio can make you look careless. An accurate current bio helps people know who you are, what you do, and how to connect with you. Thanks for being here. See you next week.